for a lot of us, if we knew that level of support was waiting for us, it would make it a lot easier to get over ourselves, to get out of our own way, to really push past a lot of the fears that stop us all. I mean, still today.
So you talked about how you had to get comfortable with the discomfort. What were some of the thoughts you were having at the time that might have been negative or weren't self-serving? How did you, get to a place where you finally overcame that and pushed through?
It started in this season of just restlessness. That feeling was actually what led me to say yes to writing a book. And I released the book. It was self-published. I had really no audience other than my little network marketing community. And I remember on launch day being, moved to tears by seeing all these people in my life to celebrate something that I had done. And then my editor calls. She said, "There's a typo on the cover." In that moment, I remember being like, okay, not ideal. And also I had to laugh at just how perfect it actually was. And I remember I had this mantra when I was writing, and I just kept saying, done is better than perfect. I'm so proud of myself that I kept going because I could very easily not be sitting here today, because that was the representation of what I thought my worst fear was. What if I put myself out there and I get criticized? What if I put myself out there and I don't look, whatever standard of perfection I was trying to live up to.
Welcome, everyone, to the Beyond the Cover podcast. My intent with creating this podcast was to provide a platform where men can speak openly about their journeys with mental health without fear of judgment while doing so. While I, the host, or you, the listener, may not agree with everything or anything that a certain guest says for that matter, my focus is not to decipher what is right or wrong. Rather, it's to gain a better understanding of why somebody thinks and acts the way that they do. And with this understanding, we will begin to make better sense of our own lives and the world around us. So join me as we open the books into these men's journeys and dissect the pages within. Lindsey, welcome to Beyond the Cover.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am excited as well because it's really great for me to be able to connect with people within our incredible community of Scottsdale/Phoenix. I've been able to find that there are so many awesome people that also it feels like we have a web that's just, from one person to the next. Everybody seems to know everybody. And there's a lot of successful people out here in their own realms, which is something that I have grown to really appreciate living in this area. Entrepreneurship is rampant. It's everywhere amongst us. It was not as common in Missouri, where I come from. In fact, if you ever heard the word entrepreneur, you would hear the follow-up, well, 99% of entrepreneurs fail within the first few years. That was like the direct tie to entrepreneurship. And so I never thought of it as a viable path just because the odds were stacked against me. If I were to try to jump into that realm, am I going to become the 1%? And the answer was yes, because eventually I switched my mindset to believing I was amongst the 1%, no matter what I did. And you, I imagine, are in the same boat. So on the cover, you are the founder of Powerhouse Women, which is a community and platform designed to support and inspire women entrepreneurs. You've also written a book, which was Powerhouse Woman.
Just one.
Just one. Okay. And again, you encourage women to pursue their entrepreneurial dreams and overcome self-doubt, which I love. I think that is one of the biggest killers of success. In fact, it was one of the biggest ones for me.
Yeah.
And so we are going to dive into all things entrepreneurship today, but also the mindset behind it, because I am curious on your thoughts, but I believe now, having been in the entrepreneurial world for a couple of years now, that the make or break comes down to the mindset.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so the first question I want to ask you is kind of like an interesting one. And I'm curious, there's no right or wrong way to take this, but I, as a man in the entrepreneurial world, I have to imagine things may be a little bit different for a woman, especially because you're focused on bringing women up with you to be successful alongside you in the world of entrepreneurship. So I'm curious if you feel that women are taken as seriously as men in the entrepreneurial world.
I don't really know, because I really don't pay attention so much to what other people think
Mm-hmm.
about what's possible for me. I think one of my strengths, this is how I'll say it, is that I've never looked at anything in my life, including my gender, as a limitation.
Okay.
I never looked at having a small social media audience as a limitation. I just knew I had to think differently. I knew I had to create more of a connection and a community if I really wanted to stand out. So I don't think that much about being a woman versus being just an entrepreneur and a human being who's on this growth journey.
Yeah.
And I think no matter what, I think we could probably sit here and have a conversation as men, as women. There's things that are advantages and disadvantages if we choose to see them that way. But I think as women, number one, I can say my intuition is really one of my superpowers in business. And that is something that tends to be characteristic of a lot of women. I think my compassion, my empathy make me really great at connecting with people. So I don't really take that much time to think about if people are taking me serious or not, because it's more important if I'm taking myself seriously.
Yeah.
I guess.
No, I love that. I think it's an awesome answer because I do think that somebody could take that question and give a multitude of answers to it and reasons as to why there's still a discrepancy in the workplace, which we see in society. I mean, people do talk about how there's certain there's certain ethnicities that may have privilege, versus others. And I've seen, that instances of that in my own life.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's a really healthy perspective to be able to take it, just take the situation and say, hey, I'm sure there might be some factors at play, but ultimately, I mean, they're really no influence on my own life, as long as I don't give that any weight.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you've really just focused on, hey, I am me, and I'm going to focus on what I can do every day to better myself. And if I face roadblocks, it's just a matter of how do I overcome them, not seeing it as a societal roadblock that you just, or a glass ceiling. For you, it sounds like you're in the mindset of, hey, the sky's the limit. I'll just keep climbing until I decide not to.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned too, that of course there are actual discrepancies. There are actual things that people have to face when it comes to, financially. I think it's a lot different for different populations, for different demographics. There is still discrimination. So I'm not at all saying that to spiritually bypass that those things are very real. I think when I reflect on, really, your question was so beautiful. It makes me think about my chosen perspective of my experience in it. And that's the only thing that I really have to go off of. But that's not to say that people aren't facing actual discrimination, actual hardships that you and I may not ever have to experience.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not by any means devaluing the fact that there may be some great viewpoints for people to make, and an uphill battle to fight that people have to, and certainly we can acknowledge that. I do think though that a lot of times individuals can get so in their head of all of the things that could work against them that they're not able to just do the work because they're constantly distracted by external noise.
Yeah.
For you, I saw that, and we just talked about this before we hopped on air here, you were a grocery store bagger at the age of 14, which is funny. You said you maybe weren't even supposed to be.
Was that legal? I don't know if that was the legal working age, but I wanted to work. I've always wanted to work.
You had a fake ID at 14?
Probably.
You're like, here you go. Parents were trying to get you out of the house.
We knew the store manager. No, I begged to be able to get a job. I was so excited to work.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so was that the age when it just clicked and you said, I really want to work? Because I find it interesting. I never wanted to work. And my parents made a deal with me that as long as I played 3 sports, I didn't have to work. And so I played 3 sports for as long as I could until I started getting cut from the teams. And then I had no choice. And then I'm like, well, hey, I'm working out on the off season when I would be playing baseball. And Dad's like, no, you got to get a job. So my first job, I was I was a busser at a restaurant, which I ended up getting fired from a week later after I broke a plate and hit my head against a chandelier. It was an Italian
Didn't go
restaurant.
well.
So the
Yeah.
Chandelier was low. I was tall. I smacked my head against it.
It's a
And,
whole thing.
it was a very interesting first experience for a job, and I didn't do too great. But for
Mhm.
you, I mean, did you just always have this drive
Mhm.
to work?
I think I've always had a drive. When I look back even at what that job represented for me at that point, it was freedom. It was the ability to make my own money and the ability to start taking control of my life. I'm the oldest child. I'm I'm just like a stereotypical Capricorn in every sense of the word, if people resonate with that. So
Mhm.
I think I've just always known I wanted to do something great with my life. And going back to what you were saying too about growing up in a smaller town or in the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest, and there weren't examples of entrepreneurship. All I saw was people who, really worked hard and they achieved success that way. So I think I had that instilled in me from a young age.
Mhm.
And all that I knew was that I liked the experience of making my own money. I liked the experience of having purpose, even if it was going and, I would bag the groceries, but then I would also go and like stock the shelves and just make sure it was all perfect. I just always took a lot of pride in, I guess, my work. And that at a very, very young age, I remember feeling that way.
Yeah.
And I think I've had a job ever since.
How was your parents' work ethic? Because I have to imagine that,
Mhm.
again, I mean, I think I was playing with Lincoln Logs at 14, still probably.
I mean,
And
to be fair,
so,
so was I
so
in between
in between
my
your
shifts.
shifts, yeah.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, I'm like playing video games in between my shifts of playing Lincoln Logs and trying to again make it seem like I'm playing 3 sports so that I could stay away from the work realm. But you mentioned that, I mean, being in the Midwest, which I do agree. I think there's the work ethic
Yeah.
is I picked up on people that just showed up every day, clocked in, clocked out, put their hours in. But I also attribute my ability to connect with people. I think, there's a friendliness to the Midwest.
Totally.
And it's a little bit slower paced, and that allows people to not feel rushed. And so if you're on the East and West Coast, people are racing around and they have 3 jobs just to be able to pay the rent. And so I found they're not rude people, they're just busy people.
Yeah.
And I think what I found was the Midwest, what I love about it is I've been able to take a lot of those traits that I learned as far as like being able to interact with people, because there was this slowness to that culture where I'm not in a rush, therefore I can stop and talk to you even if you're a stranger I just met. And so I'm sure certainly you can agree that there's a lot of great qualities that you've picked up from the Midwest. But what was the at-home dynamic for you? I mean, were your parents just the model citizens for hard workers, and that's what rubbed off on you?
My parents were model citizens and still are to this day of just really providing a safe and really loving environment for us as kids to be exactly who we wanted to be. And my dad worked, my mom stayed home with us, and they both in those individual respects work very hard. I mean, to this day, very hardworking people. So yes, I think a lot of that was modeled, and there was this internal drive that was innate in me as well. So I remember this is now probably giving you way more than ChatGPT gave you. I was just like such a rule follower, such a good girl, I just really had this big desire for my life. And I remember calling my mom in college and complaining to her that I had gotten a B, and she was like, shouldn't you be like underage drinking or something? I can't really relate to your life. So on that sense, yes, I adopted a lot of their work ethic, the way they treat people. They treat people the same no matter who you are. And I think that's really contributed to a lot of who I am today.
Yeah.
But I remember them kind of looking at me and going, we don't know where you got this from, just this drive and this ambition. And yet they always really encouraged it.
Yeah.
And just provided that safe place for me to just be who I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an underrated gift.
1,000%. I have really begun to focus on my childhood and the environment that I was raised within, and realizing a lot of parallels as to why I am the way that I am today, both the good and the bad. I have loving parents. I have a loving family. I'm super close to all of them, which is awesome. As I found out, not many people Well, there are people that are close to their families, but some aren't. And
Yeah.
I could never fathom that. And so I'm blessed to even have that thought process of I couldn't even imagine not being close with my family. It's the reason why I moved out here, because my two brothers moved out here before I did. And so I,
Okay.
I'm the oldest, but I still followed them
Oh,
out here because I was like, this is what's most important to me is
yeah.
family. And, I can live in any city, but being close to my brothers was, paramount for me as far as for my mental well-being. But still, there's certain parts of my childhood that I look back on. I go, oh, okay, that makes sense why I am
Yeah.
the way that I am. And so it sounds that, again, you had a very loving, supportive household, and that you felt that you could be authentically yourself and grow. And this innate passion to work, maybe there isn't a point that you can go back and recall. Maybe it was just instilled from a young age and it just stuck. That's certainly a blessing, though. And
Yeah.
so, what point did you transition into entrepreneurship? Because
Yeah.
you were the grocery store bagger at 14. When did you start saying, "Hey, wait, I can kind of forge my own path"?
Yeah. I think this kind of parallels into so many of the themes I know we want to talk about too, with like the mindset of entrepreneurship. So I finished college in Wisconsin, was recruited. I was in sales, recruited by a company. I sold carpet, commercial flooring.
Interesting. Okay.
Very sexy job. It's about as sexy as it sounds. And I say that because the timing of it, when I came out of college and got settled in Arizona, it was 2007, start of 2008. So here I am, brand new in my first career in commercial construction, and we're about to be hit with the biggest recession of our time. And commercial construction specifically was hit really hard. Arizona was hit really hard. And it was the first time, I can't remember a time before that I ever had the passing thought of starting something of my own. Even though I had all this drive and this ambition, I didn't have examples. I didn't know any entrepreneurs. Now looking back, I realize I did, but it wasn't enough in the forefront for me to see it as a possibility for myself.
Okay.
So the recession hits, and again, back to this, I think I've had a few things that are, I think, native to who I am, my makeup, the drive and the hardworking nature, and an unfallible optimism, not in a unwilling to see reality as it is, but just realizing I always have a choice. So here we are, the recession is starting. Everyone my age is getting laid off. I was 24, 25 at the time, new in my career. So you're the easiest to get rid of if companies had to scale back. And it was the first time I thought to myself, maybe I need a plan B, just in case. And that led to me, I ended up, I think where a lot of entrepreneurs start, network marketing, because you just find your way into something that gives you that flexibility. It teaches you a lot of the skills. And I'm so grateful for that season because it taught me, oh, wait, all these same skills that I'm dedicating to this company that I loved the people I worked with, but no one's passionate about selling carpet. There was, I remember
I'm surprised it was even a business, because nowadays I think hardwood floors are everything. You see carpet, everyone, especially in real estate, people like, take it out.
Exactly. So there was still a market for it back then, but I just remember having that moment where I was like, okay, maybe a plan B is a good idea, and then we'll see where that leads. And it didn't take long. Again, thinking back, it's interesting that the conversation started with my first job at 14, and just, I think as an entrepreneur, once you realize your skills can make you money and you can set your own schedule and time, and you can really control how much you can make, it was game over after that. So it took me about 5 years of deciding, okay, I don't want to be in a corporate career anymore. And then I was able to leave that career, go full-time into entrepreneurship, and then, went on to do the things that I'm doing now. But I'm so grateful. And I say that to say, 2007, 2008 for a lot of people was a really, really hard time. I think right now we're entering a time in history where a lot of people are really having a hard time. And every single time my life was about to change for the better was when I was faced with a moment like that, where I could have either chosen to see the obstacle or chosen to see the opportunity in it. And that's not to say that it wasn't hard, but
Yeah, you make a great point. I think right before you turn the corner, and you reach the goal, where people say like digging, you're 3 feet from gold. And I think what happens a lot of times is people get so tired of digging and they give up right beforehand. And for me, I think my first big entrepreneurial move was buying a short-term rental, or a house that I turned into a short-term rental. And I got to a place while I was also in the middle of a lawsuit, a false accusation, where I'm now legally, in this case where I'm like, okay, racking up legal bills. And instead of being conservative in that moment, I thought, no, I'm not letting this stupid allegation, ruin what I'm doing with my life. I'm going to just move forward as if it doesn't exist, and do what I want to do. And so I buy this house, and I get down to my final few thousands of dollars in my bank account. And I look back at it just recently. I went back to my bank account, looked, and I saw that if the renovations I would have been doing would have taken a month and a half longer, I would have had to have sold the house, because I was already paying the mortgage. I didn't have at the time solar sales, which has been such a godsend. I happened to have a conversation with a friend during that time where he said, okay, so you're having this Airbnb. I said, yeah. How's everything else going? I said, to be honest with you, real estate's not that great. There's so many agents and I'm new here. And so I'm still trying to build up my, book of business. And I said, things are kind of tight right now. And that conversation just happened to lead to, well, hey, you should meet these, 2 guys I know that are in solar sales. Have you ever thought about it? And I said, I don't want to do door to door. And he's like, no, they don't do door to door. Like they find leads online. And I said, okay, I'll have a conversation. And I just think that I was like, man, in that moment, I thought I wanted to go back to medical sales, the corporate America. I was so close because I was coming down to my few $1,000s. And I thought entrepreneurship is just not for me. This is just, again, it's showing me this because financially my back's against the wall. But I started, in that moment, I'm like, well, I'm going to work my ass off because I don't want to go broke. Yeah. And I happened to turn some things. And now I've been able to be self-sufficient in this new realm where it's like, I can take on different jobs and I work different things. And I'm like, man, but my back was against the wall in that moment. I mean, I remember I was freaked out and I'm thinking, okay, worst time to have a lawsuit, the worst time to have the least amount of money my kind of ever had. Home prices here don't help either. They're like 4 times as expensive as Missouri. And so I had this vision that I was going to make this thing work, and it did, but I just believed ultimately in myself that I was going to find a way. Yeah. And that belief is what carried me, even when I was down, to those last few dollars or whatever, I just knew, I'm like, in my heart, I'll figure it out.
And I feel like that story is such a testament to the fact that our success is ultimately tied to the amount of uncertainty we can withstand.
I like that. I've never actually heard someone say it that way, but I completely agree. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that, so you in the recession, of course, you say during that time, like, you're like, okay, this isn't going to work for me. But then you mentioned how then 5 years later, you were able to make it successful in the world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Or at least to, successful at that first level where you're like, wait, I can do this. I can live off of just what I'm creating from this business. And
so you were doing like, so I understand, part-time entrepreneurship at first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And still selling carpet. I was still slinging carpet out of my company car was a minivan. It was just, it was a season. Yeah. Yeah. And
so you had carpet just in the back of the
in the back of the minivan. 24 years old, just driving around Scottsdale. Just, that's how someone's from the Midwest.
She's like, trunk up. You're like,
no
hey,
shame.
Guys, come check out the carpet. Listen,
free minivan, free gas.
What color was the minivan, by the way?
It was seafoam green. Clayton, when I tell you this hand-me-down minivan, but I had no pride because I came from the Midwest. Again, hardworking class family. I didn't need a lot. They moved me somewhere it doesn't snow. Yeah. I mean, I had made it in my life.
Oh, because you guys, I mean, it's Green Bay area. It gets a lot
of snow. Yeah.
Of snow. Yeah. So for you, you're like, I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah. So there was this beautiful in-between stage. And I think when we talk about entrepreneurship and the mindset of entrepreneurship, I mentor so many, specifically women entrepreneurs, but I think it's the same regardless of when you're kind of straddling that line of doing the full-time thing that you don't want to be doing forever, building this dream of yours. There's such a rush to make the transition into entrepreneurship full-time, thinking that that's when you've made it. Yeah. But there's actually so much beauty to having the it's almost like having the discipline to keep working something that gives you stability while you're building something that, I mean, entrepreneurship is inherently unstable. But I would rather have that instability that I have control over than, I mean, every company that I've worked for could have fired me in an instant. So I think it's the perception of stability. But back to what I was saying too about like our ability to withstand and a high amount of uncertainty, that is actually what makes the most successful entrepreneurs. And I've had to build that because I haven't inherently had a lot of comfort with taking risks or with withstanding higher levels of uncertainty. That's taken a little while. It's like a muscle that I had to build.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's very scary. That was the lack of perceived stability is what almost led me back into corporate America.
Yeah.
But then I had to go back and think when I was in medical sales, had my doctor gotten in a car accident or passed away, God forbid, he was 98% of our business. So just like that, I would have had no business if he decided to retire. Nothing that, let's not even say that's, serious of a matter. If he just decided he wanted to retire.
Went dark.
I know. Like worst case scenario, I'm like, well, let's just peel it back. Even if he'd have just retired or switched competitors, like, gosh, I don't know. Maybe I need to check myself for like the serious, what's going on in my brain right now. But had I, had that happen, I mean, I would have lost my job because there would have been, now two reps and not enough money to be dispersed between us. And so, but I just waited as it's not possible. It's not very unlikely for that to happen, but it was always an option. So there's this perceived bit of stability that probably isn't as stable as what most people in corporate world think. Yeah. They get shocked when there's a layoff and they're like, I never thought this. And so it's just with entrepreneurship, it's glaringly obvious, the lack of stability.
Yeah.
Every day you wake up, you're the research and development team, you're the marketer, you're the you're the one that's going, the factory line worker, you're on the front line, you're the customer service rep. You're all those things. And that's been something that I've realized. I was like, man, I want a team so bad because I hate marketing myself. And I think that's just because I try to be humble. So I don't like to like pump up who I am. But you really truly have to put on all those hats. And so it's just, it's different, but it's, to your point, the autonomy that comes with it is something that I always cherish and I'm grateful for and why I stick with it. So you talked about how like you had to get comfortable with the discomfort, with the instability. Do you recall there being a time where there was a great bit of discomfort and talk to me about that and how you overcame it as far as, what were some of the thoughts you were having at the time that might've been negative or weren't self-serving?
Yeah.
How did you, get to a place where you finally overcame that and pushed through?
There have been these really pivotal moments along the journey. And one of them was the catalyst into what I now am known for, which is the community that I built and the events that I host and all of that. And it started in this season of just restlessness. I don't know if you've ever had a season like this where there's so much more for you to do and be. And what I was wrestling with that I can see now is the fact that I am really talented. I can give 60% and have it look like other people's 100. And that feels good for a while, not having to get uncomfortable, not having to push up against my own internal fears and boundaries. But I was getting to this point where I couldn't bullshit myself anymore. That the reason I wasn't growing, the reason I wasn't experiencing myself as the version I wanted to be, like this, when you can see that gap, you just feel there's something you could be and achieve and you aren't living up to that. Doesn't matter. The success, the awards, I was getting all these awards in network marketing. They put me on like covers of their magazines. I was achieving all this, but I knew inside that there was so much more. And that feeling was actually what led me to say yes to writing a book. Writing this book was never meant to be anything more than a personal project, just to shake myself out of this walking coma that I was in, of achieving the success that felt safe. And I said yes to writing this book. What a lot of people don't know, the short version of it is I had a blog for 3 years that, you're in media and marketing, you just got to be consistent. So I consistently publish one article per year. I had 3 articles on this blog. It was 3 years running, and I was so afraid. I was so afraid to put myself out there. I was paralyzed by the fear of being judged.
Yeah.
Paralyzed. So saying yes to writing an entire book felt like climbing Mount Everest. And in that year, it took about a year. It was a self-published book. It was through this program that kind of guided you along the way, and I was grateful for that. But I tried to quit 3 times. And every time I kept bumping up against that same feeling that I had experienced so many other times of, I know I want more. I can feel the energy of this version of myself that I can become. And I wanted it to be easy. I wanted it to be within my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so I would bump up against this point where I was starting to get real. And maybe you've had moments like that too, right? The criticism hits, or just your own internal criticism. And every single time I just remembered, okay, you can quit. But you already know what that version of the story feels like. Just feels like more of the same.
Yeah.
So when I say that even just completing that book, publishing that book, getting over crippling perfectionism, you name it, I had to confront every single one of the things that was blocking me. And I released the book. It was self-published. I had no audience other than my little network marketing community. And I just remember feeling really accomplished. I was actually petrified of people reading the book. That was a whole other story. So it wasn't like I had all these expectations. I'm going to be this famous author. I was just so proud of myself for doing it.
Yeah.
And I remember on launch day being, moved to tears by seeing all these people in my life sharing it on Facebook. And I remember my 4th grade reading teacher posted about it. I didn't know she was alive, much less on Facebook. Just people who came out of the woodwork to celebrate something that I had done. And I remember anchoring in that feeling because I realized that for a lot of us, if we knew that level of support was waiting for us, it would make it a lot easier to get over ourselves, to get out of our own way, to really push past a lot of the fears that stop us all. Still today, my fears and my own insecurities are my biggest roadblock. And then, because there's just this thing that happens when you really step out beyond where you would normally stop, I think there's almost always a test to see if you really learned the lesson. So my book hits bestseller on Amazon.
Wow.
Yay.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. You just get everyone you know to buy it on the same day. And my editor calls, and I'm thinking she's calling to congratulate me. This is awesome. How exciting. And she said, Lindsey, I'm sick to my stomach. And then I paused because you're like, not what I was expecting. Go on. She said, there's a typo on the cover. Now, to some people, that might not seem like a big thing. But again, if people could have seen behind the scenes the crippling perfectionism that almost stopped me from doing the thing in the first place.
Yeah.
I remember having this moment where it was sort of like, I don't know if this is something you relate to in your era, but Saved by the Bell, when Zach Morris would do the TV timeout and everyone around would stop. And then he would talk to camera.
I know of it was a show, right?
But it was a show. Trust me, anyone over the age of 40 right now is with me.
Okay.
But it was like that moment where everything stopped and I realized this was my opportunity. Because at that very moment, I could have said, this is so embarrassing. See, I never should have done this. I'm such an idiot. I'm whatever.
Yeah.
And I could have pulled all that back. And Powerhouse Women, what people know me for today, wouldn't exist. Because there was no plan for events. There was no plan for everything else that came after it. In that moment, I remember being like, okay, not ideal. And also I had to laugh at just how perfect it actually was. Because either I was going to really anchor in the lesson. And I remember I had this mantra when I was writing. And I just kept saying, done is better than perfect. I knew I was pushing up against all these patterns that were keeping me really small, keeping me in a life that I just wasn't happy with. And in that moment, I remember just kind of laughing it off and saying, well, now there's about 200 copies out there that I'm sure will be a collector's item worth tens of dollars someday.
Yeah, it could be triple in value for those people.
I'm so proud of myself that I kept going,
Yeah.
because I could very easily not be sitting here today, because that was the representation of what I thought my worst fear was. What if I put myself out there and I get criticized? What if I put myself out there and I don't look, whatever standard of perfection I was trying to live up to.
Yeah.
And it was so crippling. So now I just get to serve and help so many other women through those same things, the same fears that I do still face on a daily basis.
Yeah. There's so much that I can relate to there. I think it's awesome that you mentioned, really you wrote the book for yourself.
Yeah.
It was an audience of one. And that's exactly the same way that I looked at it when I was writing my book. I have a friend that has a book writing business. He helps other authors write their books. And he said that imposter syndrome is one of the biggest reasons why people never actually follow through with it. They may start off writing because they're super, super excited, but then writing a book's hard. For me, it was like my baby. It took me 9 months. I sat in my brother's apartment after I just, was broken up with. And so I'm living in Arizona in a back corner of a room, small little square room. I couldn't even I had a path to get to my bed. That was it. Everything else that I owned was stacked up in that room. I locked myself in there. I'd sit on my bed with my pillow prop behind me and I would just type on this computer. And for 9 months I did it. And there were multiple points where I thought, first off, I don't even know how to organize this. This is going to be a jumbled mess, just like everything in my head is. And no one's going to read this. And I should just stop. But then I caught myself in that moment and thought, Clayton, this is for you. Write it for you and only you. If nothing more, you're journaling right now and you're helping get your thoughts out onto paper, out of your head. And so you're addressing a lot of these things that you've always suppressed. So just do it for you. It'll be cathartic. And at the end of the day, it doesn't have to sell any copies. My book wasn't a bestseller. Even though I did know of that trick, I still didn't get enough people to buy the first day. And I remember thinking, and for a split second, wow, look at all the other bestsellers, of previous bachelorettes and bachelors, and mine flopped, with just a few hundred copies sold. But then I instantly caught myself and thought, you stuck this out for 9 months. And how many people actually ever follow through with writing a book?
Right. Yeah.
And, I thought, be proud of yourself, because you followed something all the way through. For 9 months, you stuck it out for no other reason other than yourself. Look at the investment that you made in yourself and be proud of that. And now just invest somewhere else. Okay. You're not going to be an author. That the universe told me, hey, you're not a bestseller. I don't want you writing the second book.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. Good on you, but probably not writing the second book.
You never know.
But you never know.
It's a long life.
You never know. It's a long life. And I joke there. It hasn't stopped me from wanting to write a second book. Then the perfectionism, and this might just be you mentioned your oldest child. As am I. And I think, we place these high expectations on ourselves as the oldest child to basically be a beacon of light and setting the example for our younger siblings. And that's how I always have been. I'm always trying to reach higher and higher so that I can show my brothers what's possible. And for me, writing the book was one of those things, but it was a tough moment. But then I also started telling myself, as I started to become more I wrote the book and it was on basically the premise was writing it for people that are wanting to get into mental health and starting to become mindful. And I was just beginning that journey because I grew up in a household of all boys. Mindfulness was not a thing. Talking about our emotions was completely absent. And so, but then I started getting really big into mindfulness and the psychology behind it all. And then I started thinking, this book is so juvenile. It's so amateurish. People are going to read this and be like, dude, I learned this when I was 14. And so I was like, man, I wish I could keep writing. And at one point, towards the end of the book, when I was writing it, I told my editor, I was like, I got to keep writing. He's like, dude, if you continue to add things based on what you learn, you'll never finish this book. And
it's the hardest part.
I was like, okay, fine. I'll just end it. I'll end the book. So I wrapped the book. And now I'm really grateful because I look at it, I'm like, it's not amateurish. It's not, a book that's elementary. I mean, for some people, sure, that are certainly very well versed and are very mentally mature. They might look at it and be like, okay, yeah, I mean, it's a good reminder, or a refresher. But for some people, I'm like, hey, there are people out in the world that don't know where to start. You gave them a map of hey, if you're going from ground zero, here's where you can go.
Yeah.
And so all I did was just shift that narrative and say, oh, how grateful am I that I wrote something so simplistic?
Yeah.
Because now it helps people that have nowhere to, they're like, I don't know where to start. It's like, start here. This is
Yeah.
at the very, ground level. And then, as you start, going past journaling, you can get into breath work, and you can maybe get into plant medicines and all these other complex things.
Yeah.
But I learned to love the fact that it wasn't a perfect book, but it was perfect for the timing. And therefore I could look at it and say, I'm proud of this.
Yeah.
And it was a mindset shift.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, I really could relate to your story as far as like holding back, being like, maybe I need to just wait a little longer, add this, and it's not perfect yet. And it's like, it's never going to be.
Yeah.
So I think you just have to keep that in mind. And I think entrepreneurs also see that as like, nothing's ever perfect. But we can put out what we have, what's best at that moment, and then learn as you go.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the lessons I've learned. What are some other lessons that you're now teaching? Because it sounds like, again, like with the community you've built, you're spending a lot of time pouring into women and getting them to a place where they feel they can also navigate in this realm. So I guess I'll backtrack a little bit. What are the most common roadblocks you see, or things said by people that are just getting into entrepreneurship that might be having hesitancies? Where do those hesitancies typically lie?
Yeah. There are these themes that when I look at my own journey, even you've touched on so many of them, and then the women that I am just so honored to talk to on a daily basis. And I think having conversations like this are important so that we can normalize that, because I think we all also have this misconceived notion that we're the only ones that are experiencing it. So perfectionism, we already talked about that, which I think that's just really rooted in the fear of uncertainty. And I mean, we could go on a whole rabbit hole about that. Certainty is like the one thing that we're not guaranteed in this life, but we spend a lot of time, even as a society, trying to manufacture it, which makes sense as you start to dig into the way that our brains are formed in childhood and how much safety and security is an actual need. But when we're looking for it outside of ourselves, when we're looking for it from a job, when we're looking for it anywhere else outside of ourselves, it's a losing game. So really overcoming that perfectionism, the fear of uncertainty, which also kind of manifests as just this fear of moving forward. Okay, I don't see the path. And I tell people all the time, I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm not that person yet. I couldn't see this far 10 years ago. So I'm not going to try to imagine where I'm going to be in 10 years. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be so much further that I can see. So really understanding that and being in a community that's talking about uncertainty more from the standpoint of normalizing the fact that if you're on a growth path, you're not going to see with complete clarity what to do next. So that's a big one. The fear of criticism, I think a lot of us.
Yeah. I think you just can couple fear into like, that's really the overarching thing in life that stops so many people, is just fear, whether it's fear of judgment from others, fear of failure.
You mentioned fear of being an imposter, which that's a big one. That's a big one.
Because I guess that would be fear of being inauthentic. And so this isn't me, so how can I put this out there to the world? Fear is a massive one. For me, it was the number one, and I feel that it's, if you had anybody say top 3 reasons why they haven't done something, fear is usually always in the top 3. So I agree 100%.
And then just the stories that we tell ourselves. I think you speak so openly about your journey in self-discovery. What I love about entrepreneurship is I think what often is the hard people struggle with in the beginning, until if you just accept this as a giant personal development plan disguised as a financial opportunity, entrepreneurship is going to be great, because you're always growing, and money just responds to, it's a reflection of what I believe about myself, what I believe about my work, what I believe about my value. So if we're measuring it against anything else other than what is my internal state and how am I showing up and am I growing, it can start to become more significant than it needs to be. And I'm just talking about money because as entrepreneurs, that's usually what we use as like the measuring stick to our success. And you have to have a profitable, healthy business to have a business.
Yeah.
But I think that we can easily just get it wrong. We forget that this is a personal growth game. That's what it is.
Yeah. I love that you highlight that with growth, because that's something where with an entrepreneurial life, it looks different every day.
Yeah.
And so I think if I try to hit the similar or same metric every day over and over and over, there might be opportunity for growth somewhere else that I need to go in order to like refine my skills over here. It's like, hey, maybe you need to become a better public speaker. So yes, I'm working in like podcast sales and trying to build this business, but I need to start taking more speaking opportunities because, when somebody comes in and I'm trying to sell them on our product, I have to be a great speaker. And so, I think with entrepreneurship, you start to realize that anything that's growth can be beneficial, and there can be some type of tie-in, even if it doesn't directly follow the same path. So for me, I always tell myself, beat yesterday every day, which I love because I think first off, it's just me focusing on me. So just beat yesterday's version of myself, which means how do I do that? I go, okay, learn one new thing a day. And if I learn something new every day, then I'm better than I was the day before, or more intelligent than I was the day before, whatever it is. I have an additional tool in my tool belt. And so that's really helped me out a lot. And then just understanding that growth is growth, so stop trying to explain it in my head as, well, I grew in hip hop dancing today, which I do. But that has nothing to do with my, entrepreneurial life, which was completely false.
Yeah.
I have another opportunity that's coming. I can't say a lot about, but it was because of my dancing, the opportunity presented. The last thing I would have expected. I was just dancing because it was authentic to me. I always wanted to learn.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I have a life-changing, opportunity that I took. And it's like, why? How'd that happen? Because I was dancing, and I thought that had no tie, and I was just doing it on my own free time. And so I was like, wow, that just goes to show you that as long as you're doing something, I think the universe just guides you towards where you're meant to go and what aligns with you. Which in that realm, I'm curious, you mentioned being a Capricorn, right?
Yeah.
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 Is astrology, is that something that you lean into as like one of the modalities as far as like with that helps like drive you on a daily basis? Because for me, I actually just did like a chart that's actually AD. Yeah, I did it. So AD was mentioning to me that he had done one himself, and he's like, dude, you should look into this. If you know where you were born at what time, like you can learn so much about yourself. And so I typed it in and I was like, okay, who's following me? Like,
right? It's creepy.
Like, this is completely on par.
Have you done your human design?
No, I haven't done that.
Okay, this will be a sidebar conversation afterward. So human design kind of takes the principles of astrology. I don't know that much about it. But similar to you, it's revealed a lot of things that are more than anything, they're just confirming of how I do feel. And it's given me a lot of, I think, just permission to be my true essence.
Yeah.
But human design, that one will mess you up in the best way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like you just fill out information online.
Same information. Okay. But what it does is it teaches you, especially for entrepreneurs, it really it pinpoints some things that I think are really important for us to know about ourselves as entrepreneurs. One of them being, how do we make decisions best? And how does our intuition uniquely speak to us?
Yeah.
I have a pretty strong gut intuition. I always have, but I would find myself logically trying to make sense of it, or logically trying to sometimes fight against it. And the more as an entrepreneur, I've understood how to fine tune my intuition, what things I say yes and no to, how to protect my energy. It's been really, really powerful.
Yeah. I feel like it's so fascinating to me how, as I've been able to grow into my more authentic self, that like energy attracts energy. And so it's no accident that you and I are both sitting here. It's also no accident that me tapping into my intuition has led to the biggest growth in the last year of my life. It was something that I never tapped into. I would always try, every time my intuition, that voice in my head would say something, I'd have my logical conscious brain that would jump in and be like, no, that's not possible. You can't do that. Like, that's like, what makes you think it's so out there? There's no way that's going to work.
Yeah.
And I've recently like categorized humans as like living in 3 different realms. You have like the unconscious people that I think are the ones that are just glued to their phones up, it's up to their face.
Yeah.
When they clock out from work, they go straight home and they turn on the TV and they shut their minds off for 3-4 hours, and they just basically, they're an autopilot.
Yeah.
And there were points in my life where I was in that mindset where it's like, there's so much potential that you could be capitalizing on that instead they're just basically doing what's safe and structured. I'm going to go home. I have my job. I go back and I, watch 3-4 hours of TV. Some people are okay with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think sometimes what can happen is you fall victim to, again, like doom scrolling, being on, turning on another show, which it's like, really, what is this doing for your, progress as a human? I mean, you're watching these shows, these fantasy shows that do what? I mean, for some people can learn from them, but, I think you have that unconscious mindset. Then you have, conscious thinkers that are, they're aware of their present moment. They're thinking ahead into the future, and they're thinking about their past. So they could be chronic overthinkers, but they're at least they're understanding of what's going on around them. They're paying attention. And then I think you get to that place of like the subconscious mindset, which is really, to me, that's your intuitive mind, where it's a feeling.
Yeah.
And so there's no rationale behind it. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but you just feel compelled to do something, to have a conversation with somebody, to go try this out. And ultimately it guides you down a path that you look back on and be like, wow, my life's incredible. I mean, I've been tapping into that subconscious and that intuition. And what I thought was interesting was with this astrology test I just did, it mentioned for me that I like to take on a lot of different projects. But I'm not meant to become a master at any one of them, because the point is that for me is I'm meant to acquire a few skills from each of those realms as I carry myself to my ultimate purpose. Because if I became a master at one of them, I would basically lock in, cut out the other 5. And then that purpose that's up here, I wouldn't reach, because I'd be like, okay, I'm crushing it in real estate, making millions of dollars. I'm gonna become a full-time real estate agent.
Yeah.
And so that was, when I read that, it certainly helped me out a lot. I was like, thank you, astrology. Like, whether or not it's true, I now choose to believe it, which now makes it true in my life, because I always thought, man, I'm really good at anything I put my mind to, but I never become a master. And why can't I just lock into one thing? I get bored. I can't just make one thing work. And, with reading this, this astrological.
I know that's
okay. Now it sounds weird in my head.
Mouthful.
Astrological like map.
Yeah.
That was created for me. I was able to rework the perspective into seeing it as, hey, I'm not failing in all these realms. I'm just meant to acquire skills as I make my way to this, to my purpose, which is going to be something completely different. I never thought reality TV was going to be my thing. And then it became it. And I thought, but I haven't become a master of reality television. So it's like, I'm probably not meant to be a reality TV person in the long run. So it's like, what am I supposed to be? Well, who knows? All these skills are going to build to something. And it gives me now a perspective of, okay, I've worked in all these different fields, and now I can draw, parallels between them. So it was a mindset shift that was brought on by astrology, but it was just very interesting how, again, I'm like, I could look at this like I'm never meant to be great in any one thing, or I can look at it like I'm supposed to be really good at multiple things, but never too good to the point where I basically like lose sight of my purpose or follow that path subconsciously that I don't really understand where it's taking me some days, but it's like, it's taking me there. It's just I'm acquiring skills along the way. And so I don't know, it really helped me out a lot. And that's why I brought it up to you, because I'm like, hey, has this been an influential part of your life? Because I'm not by any means like super well versed in that matter, but I'm open to hearing about it and listening and keeping an open thought process of like, maybe there's something here.
And I think it's just like anything, it can become another thing that people use to try and find certainty. So I don't use it as an excuse to say, well, I'm a Capricorn, so I'm not XYZ, or I think it's just really cool to learn about myself and learn about my growth. And what you were saying has been my experience too, where if I'm not careful, I would have started to compare my strengths to other people's. And it has just kind of brought me back to this center, which I think is where my intuition, like when I think about being centered, that's where I feel my nervous system is calm and I have that connection to my own inner guidance. And that inner guidance has always, it's like this loving force that feels like it's just always been there with me as I've been the overachiever and trying to prove myself through external validation and, all these things. It's like this calm presence that's just waiting for me to find my way back home.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, tools like understanding a little bit of astrology or human design, or there's so many others, has just helped me really get to know and love the person who I am while I'm on my way to becoming the next version of myself, because I'm not a fixed being.
Yeah.
I think I'm similar to you where, what I'm doing now, this isn't going to be the only thing I create in my life. I'm only 41. I have decades ahead of me of more things I'm here to create.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the product.
Yeah.
And if I were putting myself up against someone who their life purpose, they are meant to master one thing.
Mm-hmm.
If we think about surgeons and people who we want those people to be hyper focused on one thing.
Yeah.
We don't want that person to also be a podcaster and
Exactly. Yeah.
But if I'm comparing what success looks like against someone whose life mission and the reason their soul is here is different than mine, I'm going to find evidence for. A lot of times we're looking for evidence for those unconscious stories that we have about ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just it's a really exciting journey. Life in general, I think so many people just have to figure out how to avoid distractions and really tap into presence. And I think, what are some ways for you? You talk about feeling that intuition and listening to it. What are some ways that you get into that state? Are you meditating? Are you taking 10 minutes a day to journal your thoughts? What are some of the ways that you're really locking into being present and to allowing your intuition to speak?
One of the biggest lessons of the past 2 years, year and a half, I was really feeling an intuitive nudge to slow down a little bit, which I don't know if you...
Everything you're saying, I have a story for.
I hate it. I don't want to slow down. And it was ushering me into a really, the last year and a half of my life has been the most profoundly transformational and in ways that I think a previous version of me never would have chosen. So all of that to say, one of the lessons that ushered me into this season is just that stillness isn't the same as laziness. I think being still felt so lazy, felt so unproductive. Again, all these things too, like a Capricorn, it's like wearing an itchy sweater. Ugh, yuck. I just don't want
to. You're a Taurus too, apparently, because I'm a Taurus and I feel the same way.
Similar energy. So finding what stillness meant for me. Realizing that I don't have to meditate for hours a day. For me, it's going on a walk and maybe not listening to a podcast that day. Yeah. The other thing, and going back to being kind of a rule follower, goody, I, for the first time ever, felt called to do a microdosing protocol this last year. And it was actually really helpful in the lessons that I was integrating. So that's just microdosing, medicinal mushrooms to where still fully functional. You're not, it's not something that takes
full-on trip.
It just opened up so much more, I think, of that intuitive nature of me and helped me to integrate this season I'm being asked to step into now, which is a little bit, it feels slow. To the part of my nervous system that for the 40 years up until this point has thought that my value comes from working. Yeah. So back to that work hard mentality that I love about myself, I also was using that to cope and to not feel. Yeah. And so a lot of this last year has been allowing myself to feel on a deeper level. And it was really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah. I love that you said stillness is not laziness. They're not one and the same. That is so true. I've experienced that multiple times. And what happened was I thought I was supposed to just squeeze out every hour of the day with productivity. And I was doing it for about 6 months and then I burnt myself out severely. Where I had to take 2 weeks off. I couldn't even take a day off and then I tried to get back into the next day. And I was like, no, I have no interest. I am so depleted. And so for me, I took a beat and took a couple of weeks to just say, okay, hey, I don't need to travel somewhere right now, but let me just sit in silence and pivot and get my work done that I need to get done, but with the excess, really like tap into what I'm feeling. I mean, why am I burnt out? Is it just because I'm working too hard and that's it? Or am I being burned out because I'm pushing into something that actually I don't like? And I found out that one of the ventures that I was going down was not something I wanted to do. And it was severely impacting my mental state. And so because I had to step back and look, I was like, where is this unhappiness coming from? Where is this tension coming from? And it was coming from one thing in particular. And I was like, oh, well, let me get rid of that, because I looked at it. I was like, is this making me a lot of money? No, it's not. So why am I doing it? Oh, I was doing it at first. It was cold calling for real estate. And I was doing it, making hundreds of calls every morning. And I first started doing it because I wanted to refine that skill. I wanted to face rejection at a high rate and basically overcome that fear of rejection. I was like, well, if I get rejected enough, exposure therapy, I'm going to end up overcoming it or just better handling it. And it did work that way. But then what happened was it still has a negative effect when you're getting hung up on nonstop and people are yelling at you and saying you're the 50th person to call them. And it's no fault to them. They're getting called by so many people. But I got to a place where I stepped back and I was like, okay, I'm much better with handling rejection, but I'm not going to be I'm starting my day off getting yelled at and rejected. And then everything else I'm doing is now taking a hit. Yeah. Now I'm walking into podcasts or walking into all my other ventures with not at my happiest and not at my my 100% that I could be at. So now it's impacting all the other areas of my life. My relationships, I'd be stressed out after I got yelled at so many times. I was coping with marijuana and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna get high and eat pizza because I'm so stressed about, this, I did 2 hours today of cold calls. And I realized that I no longer was receiving value from it. And so because I took that moment to step back, I was like, that's burning me out. Stop doing it. You're blessed that you have other ventures that are making you money. You taking this out does nothing. Yeah. It doesn't hurt you one bit. In fact, it helps. And it did. I took it off my plate. I was like, now I have more time, to focus on my other avenues. So an extra hour a day, I can now pump into my podcasting business. And I feel more aligned. I love the podcasting business. I love being able to bring people's visions to life. And so I swapped that hour for another hour pushing into one of my passions. Yeah. But it wouldn't have happened had I not stepped back and slowed down.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I think the fear for those of us who are really driven is that if we slow down, we slow momentum. And I think there's seasons, right? Because in the beginning of starting a business, it is all hands on deck. You're kind of being fueled by that fire of the potential of what could be. And so you're working in a different way than when you are at maybe another season of the business, that it requires you to connect to that part that doesn't, I always say, your intuition isn't going to shout over the noise of a busy life. It'll always be there, but it's not until I get quiet. It's not until I look within. And a lot of times what my intuition is trying to help me see has been things that I maybe don't want to see. So that's why I cope and I continue to stay busy, because I don't want to feel the emotions that it brings up. Yeah. And the emotions and when I'm ready to face those are almost always where my next huge breakthrough lies. And I'm learning that, but it's taken a while.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I feel now that the valleys, I need them for growth. Yeah. And so every time I'm met with a valley now, I just go, okay, God, I guess I'm going back in sooner than I thought, and that's, but with that, and again, I have my faith as well. So I lean on that, but I look at it and I go, all right, I know that on the other side of this will be so much growth. And again, adversity breeds character. Adversity is what, constitutes growth. And adversity is where most of my life lessons have all occurred. Yeah. And so I wouldn't say I welcome it, not to the degree sometimes that I've faced. I'm like, don't give me another, accusation again. I don't want a third. Unfortunately, I've just think my life has happened the way that it has. But I look at it and I go, okay, I know that if I'm going back into the fire, that I'll be forged in it. And so again, that perspective alone also says, allows me to walk into it with a different sense of energy and a little bit of excitement, not as much fear, more just, okay, time to be courageous, time to, put on the big boy boots and big boy pants and and go to work,
Yeah.
and just know that on the other side of this, I'll be patting my back briefly before I find myself in another valley. I think
Yeah.
in a way, maybe I'm subjecting myself to more valleys on purpose because I saw what it did to me as far as character development. So um, it's just an interesting mindset to switch away. Because again, I used to just stick to what I knew, but then I got into a really, really bad bout of complacency.
Yeah.
Where it ended up driving me mad.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to a place where the pain of staying the same overcame the pain of change.
Yeah.
And I could have died there in Columbia, Missouri, working in medical sales and making six figures. And that was my moment of complacency at 28 years old, which was the catalyst towards my life changing. I went on reality TV later that year and my life forever changed. My life was fine, but I felt that I was meant for so much more. And that complacency just stuck with me as if I was like, this can't be it. I can't die here. Like this can't, I was acting as if it was life or death, but that's the way that I conceptualized it. Some people were like, they'd say, hey, your life was fine. And I was like, yeah, but I realized now I'm like, fine for you, maybe like you would have been fine with that, but I wasn't. And it really was at the end of the day, to your point. Yes, it was a matter of life or death.
Yeah.
Because I was not living an authentic life. I was so far from the real version of myself. I was a facade. I'd built up what I thought was impressive and lived this life that I hated. Even though I was successful on paper, I couldn't stand what I'd become. And so, I finally just said, that's it. I can't look in the mirror and be this version anymore. It's not even real. And so I went down the deepest, darkest path of my life. And now I'm the real version of me, which is super cool. So, I hope my story helps people. And that's why I share it. And then I interact with a lot of individuals like yourself nowadays that nobody tells a story of entrepreneurship that's easy.
No. It's
grueling. It's hair pulling. It's, looking in the mirror, questioning if you have what it takes, the resiliency, the grit, determination, questioning yourself time and time again, but ultimately never fully losing hope in yourself. Because I think once you lose that hope, it's over.
Yeah.
But I would say I never lost it. And I would say from what I hear, you never did either.
And the best part about those of us that are crazy enough to embark on that path is, and I can feel this from you too. I don't know much about your background or your story other than this beautiful conversation today, but it's like when you get to meet those real authentic versions of yourself, when you get to feel yourself expand, it is, again, I don't really need to do drugs. I have entrepreneurship. I have that kind of a high. And I think people glamorize the high moments, and thankfully people like you are also sharing about the low moments, because I'm only the version that is sitting in front of you today because of some really, really hard things that I've been through and I've grown from. And there have been so many moments where I wanted to give up, so many moments where I questioned if it was worth it. And I always come back to the same answer. I'm worth it. It's worth it to me to find the version of myself that I am in love with, because I'm living fully in my purpose and continuing to evolve myself. And that's what I'm here to do. I feel like you have that similar energy. I think you are here on this planet to do something big. And that's why you're so driven to evolve in the way that you are. And it's really, it's cool.
It shows us you saying that. Because I think, again, it's like things are said to me for a purpose. And so sometimes I feel the universe just like throws things in my life to remind myself that I am on the right path. There's times where I question if I'm meant to be a podcaster. I don't know if I'm meant to be a podcaster, truthfully. I don't feel in complete alignment with it. I love it. But I don't know if I'm going to be the next big thing and make it a full-time job. But also, I don't know if I need to. It's like, I can just also, even if I had, stopped today and I had 20 podcast episodes, I've already had DMs from people saying like, this was incredible. This completely shifted my mindset and my outlook on life. Thank you. And so if that's it for me, it's like I still impacted 5, 10, 20, who knows how many people, but I've impacted somebody. And if it impacted one person, it's worth it. I also liked how you just said, you have to have the lows to appreciate the highs. And I think, again, it's like, that's exactly what it is. You have to have a left in order to have a right. You have to have an up in order to have a down. You have to have the bad in order to have the good. Otherwise, if everything's good, there is no such thing as bad. And so therefore you just take that as now you're not as appreciative of the good, right? So I think when you have the lowest points, it makes you, whenever you're in the highest points, be like, I am so extremely grateful. So you have to have those counterbalances in life in order to appreciate when the good moments happen. And then when the bad ones happen, it's like, hey, just remembering that there's still good things around you and they will come. And so I think people, of course, listening to this today will understand that. And I hope they realize that it's all perspective. Everything we talked about today was perspective. And ultimately why we've succeeded in our own rights is because we believe that we're successful. Does that mean we're successful? I think we both are, yes. But by what metrics? It's really our own. And as long as we believe that we're winning, then we're winning, and nobody else can tell me that I'm not a winner, because I'll find a million reasons to show you why I am. And so it's been an awesome conversation, Lindsey. I'm so grateful that you came on here today and really just had a vulnerable conversation, one that I felt was very, really insightful. And I see why you're so great at what you do and why you're inspiring so many women and men, that are also, I'm sure, following you on social media, going, checking out the events or hearing through their loved ones, what kind of great things that you're up to. So for those that want to continue to follow your journey or get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, my two favorite places to hang out is, I love podcasting as well. So everything is under Powerhouse Women. It makes it easy to find. Our podcast is Powerhouse Women, and then Powerhouse_Women on Instagram. And I do know of men who listen to Powerhouse Women. That is allowed. I've checked.
It's allowed. Okay.
Yeah, we talk about a lot of personal growth, entrepreneurship, so many other things that you're passionate about too. And it's a great time.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Lindsey, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.